There are moments in life that don't announce themselves with thunder. They arrive quietly, almost imperceptibly. A pause between breaths, a delay in getting out of bed, a silence where a voice used to live. And then, one day, you notice that the world has dimmed, not because the sun has changed, but because something inside you has stopped glowing. This is the story of one such day. A day when I woke up and realized I no longer wanted to be here. Not in the dramatic, cinematic way people imagine, but in a weary, exhausted, empty way. The will to live had slipped from my hands as quietly as sand through fingers. And that frightened me more than anything. But this is not a story about despair. This is a story about what comes after despair, about the slow, reluctant, fragile rebirth that we never expect, but somehow, miraculously, happens anyway. So today, I want to tell you a story, not to teach, not to preach, but to bear witness to what it means to break and to what it means to begin again. It started long before the day I admitted to myself that I had lost the will to live. At first, it was just fatigue, the kind of heaviness you carry after a long week. But it didn't go away. Instead, it settled in, a permanent resident. I began to move through life like someone who could still remember what joy used to feel like, but couldn't recreate it, not even in my imagination. I kept meeting deadlines, replying to messages, smiling at the right moments. I wasn't falling apart on the outside, but the silence inside me was growing. A silence that was not peaceful. A silence that echoed. Every morning I woke up hoping that something, anything, would spark a feeling. But mornings became a daily reminder that something essential had been misplaced. Hope? Purpose? Desire? I couldn't tell anymore. It's strange. You don't notice the exact moment your inner flame goes out. You only notice when you try to warm your hands and realize the fire is cold. People think losing the will to live is loud, dramatic, chaotic. But for me, it was the opposite. It was quiet. I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to continue. Like closing a book long before the ending, because the plot no longer made sense. I stopped making plans. Stopped imagining a future. Stopped caring about goals I once obsessed over. My own life started to feel like a movie I was watching from a distance. Not participating, not belonging, just observing. And the worst part was the shame, because everything looked fine. From the outside, I had achievements, a path, recognition, dreams that people envied. But depression doesn't recognize achievements. It doesn't care about diplomas, talent, or the admiration of others. It strips everything away until all that remains is a simple, suffocating question. Why continue? I didn't have an answer. There was no tragedy, no crisis, no catastrophic event, just a morning. A morning like any other, sunlight slipping through the curtains, coffee cooling on the table, notifications buzzing half-heartedly on my phone. I sat on the edge of my bed and couldn't stand up. Not physically, emotionally. My body felt heavy, my chest tight. It wasn't sadness. It was nothingness. A void. A hollow space where a person used to live. And then, without thinking, I whispered, I don't want to do this anymore. The words landed in the room like a confession. Soft, plain, devastating. Hearing them terrified me. Because they were true. That was the moment everything cracked open. The moment I knew I needed help. Not later, not someday, now. Before the silence consumed the remaining parts of me that still remembered how to fight. People imagine the turning point as a beam of light, a revelation, an epiphany. Mine wasn't. It was a message from a friend. Just one line. "Hey, are you okay? I've been thinking about you." I stared at it for a long time. I didn't respond. But something shifted. Because even when I felt completely invisible, someone had noticed the silence. And then something else happened. Something even smaller. I opened the window. It sounds insignificant, almost trivial, but truthfully, I hadn't opened the window in days. The air felt colder than I expected, and for a moment, just a moment, I felt the hint of something that wasn't despair. Not joy, not hope, just presence. And sometimes presence is enough to keep you alive for one more hour. That hour became a day. That day became another. And slowly, painfully slowly, life's edges began to return to focus. Healing wasn't immediate. It wasn't linear. And it wasn't pretty. There were days when I could almost feel normal again. And days when getting out of bed felt impossible. I began talking to a therapist. Not because I believed it would fix me quickly, but because I needed someone to help me hold the weight I had been carrying alone for too long. I learned to name the things inside me: burnout, isolation, trauma I never confronted, expectations that were crushing me, perfectionism disguised as ambition, and beneath all of that, a deep exhaustion. The exhaustion of someone who has been strong for far too long. The process was slow, frustrating, sometimes humiliating. But every week, every session, every conversation revealed a truth I had forgotten. My pain was not a character flaw. It was a human experience. And humans are not meant to heal alone. Light doesn't return to a room by flipping a switch. It returns the way dawn does, quietly, gradually, almost imperceptibly. I began to notice small things. The taste of food again. The desire to listen to music. The urge to write something. A sudden laugh that surprised even me. I reconnected with people I care about. I allowed myself to rest without guilt. I reduced the weight of expectations I had been dragging like chains. Most importantly, I learned to look at myself with something I had denied for years. Compassion. Not pity, not indulgence. Just compassion. The understanding that being alive is hard and surviving is a victory. Even when it doesn't feel like one. People love neat endings. A single heroic moment. A sentence that explains everything. But the truth is simpler. I was saved by many small things. A message from a friend. The cold air from an open window. A therapist who didn't judge me. A morning when I forced myself to walk outside. A night when I cried and didn't apologize for it. A conversation that reminded me I mattered. A quiet understanding that I didn't have to carry everything by myself. And eventually, I began to want to live again. Not for a grand purpose. Not for an achievement. Not for a perfect future. But for the possibility. The possibility of moments that hadn't happened yet. Moments that might surprise me. Moments that might make staying worthwhile. Here is what I learned. Losing the will to live doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Feeling broken doesn't mean you're beyond repair. It means you've been carrying too much for too long, and asking for help is not failure. It's the decision to fight for a version of yourself you haven't met yet. Healing is not a destination. It's a practice. A continuous, imperfect practice of choosing life one day at a time. Some days, the choice is easy. Some days, it's agonizing. But it's still a choice. And every day you choose to stay, even when it hurts, even when it's heavy, is an act of courage. If you're listening to this and something in your chest tightens, if you recognize the silence I've described, if a part of you whispers that you are tired beyond words, I want you to know something. You are not alone. You are not weak. You are not beyond saving. Your story is not over. Even if right now it feels like it's fading, even if all you can do is breathe, sometimes the smallest spark is enough to keep the fire alive until morning. A message, a voice, a moment, a reminder that existence can still hold beauty, even if you can't see it yet. Stay. Please stay. Not because you owe the world anything, not because you must be strong, but because your story still has pages left, and you haven't read the best parts yet. I wish I could say I never struggle anymore, but that wouldn't be true. Some days, the shadows return. Some days, the world feels heavy. Some days, my heart whispers old fears. But now I know I am capable of surviving them. I am capable of rebuilding myself. I am capable of choosing life again and again and again. The day I lost the will to live was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of a different one. A story about resilience, vulnerability, and the quiet strength of simply staying. And if you are listening to this, I hope you stay too. Because existence still has room for your laughter, your voice, your story. And the world is better with you in it. Coming back to life is not as poetic as people imagine. There is no triumphant music, no cinematic switch, no sudden return of color. It's awkward, uncertain, unstable. The first weeks after realizing I wanted to stay alive felt strangely mechanical. I wasn't living yet. I was practicing waking up at the same time, practicing breathing when anxiety tightened my ribs, practicing answering messages even when I felt I had nothing to say, practicing the act of caring about myself, even in the smallest increments. And perhaps the most difficult practice of all was allowing myself to feel anything. Joy, frustration, tenderness, grief. For so long, I had lived in emotional hibernation. Numbness had become familiar, even safe. And stepping out of that numbness felt like emerging from a cave where the light was too bright to look at directly. But step by step, I did. I didn't wake up one day suddenly energized about the future. I simply learned, slowly, painfully, that life was something I could participate in again. Not perfectly, never perfectly, but honestly. And honesty, I realized, is a kind of rebirth. One of the greatest surprises of my healing was understanding how harsh I had been on myself for years. Not just during my darkest moments, but long before them. I always believed that high standards were a sign of ambition, that constant self-criticism would push me to be better, that pressure created diamonds. But what I didn't realize was that pressure also cracks the stone. Healing required something I had almost forgotten existed in me. Gentleness in allowing myself to take breaks. Gentleness in forgiving myself for the days when I couldn't be productive. Gentleness in acknowledging that rest wasn't laziness. Gentleness in understanding that not doing well didn't mean I was failing. It was strange at first, uncomfortable. I wasn't used to speaking to myself with tenderness. But the more I practiced, the more I realized that softness is not the opposite of strength. Softness is what allows strength to endure. When I stopped treating myself like a machine, my heart finally had space to breathe. And in that breathing, life slowly began to flow back in. Desire is often misunderstood. People think of it as passion, excitement, ambition, sexual energy. But in its most fundamental form, desire is simply the spark that makes us move towards something. During my darkest period, I had lost that spark entirely. Nothing called to me. Nothing pulled me forward. Life felt flat, directionless, like walking endlessly on a desert with no horizon in sight. But healing has a way of reigniting desire in the most unexpected corners. It started with curiosity. A question here, an idea there, an unexpected urge to explore a topic I hadn't thought about in months, a sudden desire to write something simple, unpolished, imperfect. At first, I brushed these things off. I didn't trust myself yet, but they kept appearing, quiet, persistent reminders that life still had color. Eventually, I realized something important. Desire doesn't return like a lightning bolt. It returns like embers. Soft, glowing, steady. You learn to protect the embers with both hands, letting them grow, slowly, carefully, until the flame reconnects with who you used to be, or perhaps with someone entirely new. And that's what happened to me. Desire didn't return me to my old self. It led me toward a new version, one that valued quiet joy over constant accomplishment, one that cared more about meaning than perfection, one that had room to breathe. Healing is not only about learning, it's also about unlearning. Unlearning the idea that my worth depended on productivity. Unlearning the belief that vulnerability was weakness. Unlearning that I had to carry everything alone. Unlearning that suffering had to be justified to be valid. Unlearning that asking for help was burdensome. But perhaps the hardest unlearning was this: that I didn't need to earn rest. That rest wasn't a reward for exhaustion. That rest wasn't a permission slip granted by achievement. That rest was, not sometimes, not occasionally, but always, necessary. For years, I had believed that life was something I had to endure through force. Push harder. Do more. Take pride in being tired. But emptiness taught me something I had refused to learn from wisdom. A life built solely on discipline eventually collapses. A life built on compassion can expand. So I unlearned. And each unlearning made space for new possibilities, new ways of living, new ways of existing in the world without drowning in it. For a long time, I kept people at a distance. Even those I cared about. Even those who cared about me. I didn't want to burden anyone. Didn't want to be seen as fragile. Didn't want to admit how close I had come to disappearing inside myself. But the truth is stark. Isolation feeds despair. Connection interrupts it. The first time I opened up to someone about what I had gone through, my voice trembled. I expected judgment, questions, confusion. Instead, I was met with quiet empathy, a presence that felt like shelter, a listening ear that didn't rush me, a softness that allowed me to unfold my pain without feeling exposed. And slowly, other connections returned. Not many, not all at once, just the ones that mattered. I learned that being seen is not a threat. Being seen is a lifeline. Every meaningful conversation, every honest exchange, every small moment of togetherness became a thread that stitched me back into the world. And in those threads, I rediscovered my own humanity. Purpose is another misunderstood word. People treat it like a mission statement, Clear, defined, grand, impressive. But for someone who has lost themselves, purpose is much simpler. Purpose is anything that gives your life shape enough to keep moving. At first, my purpose was survival. Then it was healing. Then it was reconnecting with small joys. Eventually, purpose became something softer. The desire to create, not to impress, not to achieve, not to prove anything, just to create. Writing became a slow return to myself, not the polished, perfect writing I used to force, but raw writing, honest writing. Writing that held space for confusion, grief, vulnerability. And then something surprising happened. Other people connected with it. Strangers wrote to me. Friends confessed they had felt the same. People shared their own battles with numbness and depression. And I realized my healing had a ripple effect. My story wasn't just mine. It was a bridge between isolation and understanding, between silence and voice, between despair and hope. Purpose didn't return as a lightning strike. It returned as a whisper. Tell your truth. Someone needs to hear it. It wasn't a dramatic moment. No bright sunrise. No cinematic swell. It was subtle, so subtle I almost didn't recognize it. I was walking outside. The air was crisp. The leaves were changing color. And without warning, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. A sense of aliveness. A quiet joy. A small but undeniable desire to keep going. It wasn't euphoria. It wasn't relief. It was alignment. A moment when my body, mind, and breath existed in harmony. A moment when presence felt natural again. A moment when I realized, with gentle surprise, I want to be here, not out of obligation, not because I was supposed to, not because other people needed me to, but because I wanted to, because life, simple life, felt worth experiencing. And that realization, soft as it was, became my turning point. The moment I understood that the worst was behind me, that my story had shifted from survival to rebuilding. I no longer strive for the life I once had. I no longer chase old versions of myself. I no longer worship productivity or perfection. Instead, I choose differently now. I choose rest. I choose connection. I choose honesty. I choose presence. I choose boundaries. I choose gentleness. I choose life, imperfect, unpolished, unplanned life. I still have bad days. But now, bad days are just days. Not prophecies, not spirals, not signs of collapse. I have learned to sit with discomfort without drowning in it. To ask for help when the weight grows too heavy. To nurture myself the way I once nurtured others. And with each passing month, I feel myself growing into a life that fits me. Not the life I thought I was supposed to live, but the life I'm meant to live now. A life that has room for breath, room for gentleness, room for healing, room for possibility. If you're listening to this, I want you to remember something. You don't have to be cured to move forward. You don't have to have answers to keep going. You don't have to feel strong to stay alive. You just have to stay. One breath, 1 hour, 1 day. The world may not look different tomorrow, nor the next week, but eventually, quietly, unpredictably, light returns. Not all at once, but in fragments. And those fragments are enough to rebuild a life from the inside out. You are not broken beyond repair. You are not behind. You are not hopeless. You are becoming. And there is something profoundly beautiful in a life rebuilt slowly, honestly, courageously. A life chosen one fragile day at a time. Stay. Please stay long enough to witness the version of yourself you have not yet met. They are coming, and they will be worth every moment you fought to remain alive. Silence used to terrify me. Not the ordinary kind, the soft quiet you find in a room at night, or the gentle hush of early morning. I feared the kind of silence that echoes inside a person, the silence that comes when your thoughts dim, when purpose dissolves, when life feels like a faint signal lost in static. That silence felt like erasure, as if I could vanish and the world wouldn't notice. But over time, slowly, reluctantly, I realized that silence wasn't trying to erase me. It was trying to introduce me to myself. True silence doesn't demand. It doesn't pressure. It simply sits with you, offering space to listen to what you've avoided for too long. At first, I wanted to run from it, but there is nowhere to run when the quiet is internal. So I stayed. I let the silence surround me, then enter me, then reshape me. And unexpectedly, it began to heal me. It taught me that presence isn't found in noise or movement, but in awareness. It taught me that stillness isn't a void, it's a mirror. It taught me that listening deeply to myself wasn't self-indulgent, it was survival. And in that survival, I learned something life-changing. Quiet is not emptiness. Quiet is a beginning. People talk about transformation as if it's a moment, a revelation, a sudden shift. But my transformation was not loud. It didn't announce itself. It didn't arrive like lightning. It came in slow revolutions, small turns, minute shifts, a gradual rewiring of how I existed. I stopped forcing myself to outrun exhaustion. I stopped treating my emotions as obstacles rather than signals. I stopped pretending that everything was fine when my heart had clearly been whispering otherwise for years. These weren't grand gestures. They were subtle realignments. I slept earlier, not perfectly, but consistently enough. I walked without a destination. I allowed myself to cry when I needed to, without shame or apology. I ate meals sitting down instead of standing. I practiced unclenching my jaw whenever I remembered. And perhaps the most revolutionary act, I let myself do nothing, not as a reward, not as a break, but as a necessity. Doing nothing was uncomfortable at first. I didn't know who I was without tasks, distractions, or obligations. But eventually, the stillness gave me clarity I could never find in motion. Slow revolutions rebuild the world from the inside. And that is what happened to me. Not quickly, not dramatically, but honestly. Looking back, I realized that healing wasn't made of breakthroughs. It was made of moments, quiet, ordinary, easily overlooked. The morning I woke up and didn't feel dread heavy in my chest. The day I laughed, not loudly, not long, but genuinely. The night I spoke kindly to myself instead of with contempt. The afternoon sunlight that stayed on my skin longer than my sadness did. The unexpected comfort of a warm drink on a cold day. The softness of a voice telling me I didn't have to explain everything to be understood. No therapist, no book, no advice gave me these moments. Life gave them to me. Small gifts hidden inside days I thought were meaningless. And as they gathered one by one, I realized something. Healing isn't linear, but it is cumulative. Every small moment became a thread. Enough threads become a fabric. Enough fabric becomes a place to rest. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to rest inside a life that was slowly becoming mine again. For years, everything outside of me felt threatening. Crowds overwhelmed me. Quiet rooms suffocated me. Future planning triggered me. Responsibility drowned me. Expectations paralyzed me. And interactions, simple interactions, felt like performances I no longer had the energy to rehearse for. The world felt too sharp, too loud, too demanding. But somewhere along the way, that sharpness softened. People didn't change. Work didn't change. Reality didn't change. I did. I stopped expecting myself to interact with the world as if I were always at full capacity. Some days I could show up fully present. Other days I could show up partially. And on the hardest days, simply existing was enough. When I allowed myself to fluctuate, the world stopped feeling like a battlefield. It became navigable, approachable, at times even welcoming. The hostility wasn't external. It was the pressure I put on myself to be invulnerable in a world I hadn't even allowed to hold me gently. And once I released that pressure, the world shifted from enemy to environment. Something I could move through on my own terms. Hope never returns labeled as hope. It returns disguised. For me, it looked like curiosity about a book I hadn't finished, an urge to clean my space without forcing it, a surprisingly peaceful moment driving at night, a desire, small but real, to make future plans again, a thought that sounded like maybe things could be different, not perfect, not fixed, just different. Hope is subtle like that. It doesn't shout. It whispers. You often don't realize it's there until you notice you're standing a little straighter, breathing a little deeper, believing, even slightly, that tomorrow might hold something you haven't experienced yet. Hope is never grand at first. It's gentle. It's protective. It's cautious. It returns quietly so it won't scare you. And when I finally recognized its presence, I felt something loosen in me that had been tight for far too long. Hope didn't save me. It simply invited me to stay long enough to be saved by the everyday beauty of being alive. Healing is often framed as a solitary journey, but in truth, it is relational. Some of the most profound shifts in my healing came from conversations, short, simple, unplanned. The friend who said, "I don't need you to be okay. I need you to be honest." The colleague who told me, "You don't have to pretend for me." The stranger online who wrote, "Your words helped me feel less alone today." The family member who whispered, "Take your time. We're not going anywhere." These were not dramatic declarations. They were anchors. Each one pulled me back into the world a little more. Each one interrupted the lie that I had to endure everything alone. Each one softened the rigidity of my self-expectations. There is a kind of medicine found only in genuine connection, the kind that doesn't try to fix you, but simply accompanies you. And in those conversations, I discovered something important. Being witnessed is one of the most powerful forms of healing. The future used to feel unbearable, too big, too uncertain, too heavy. Planning felt like setting myself up for failure. Dreaming felt like tempting disappointment. Ambition felt like pretending to be someone I wasn't anymore. But slowly, very slowly, the future shifted shape. I stopped seeing it as a destination and started seeing it as a landscape, one I could explore at my own pace, one with multiple paths, one that didn't require me to sprint. I began imagining small futures first. A walk I wanted to take next week. A project I might want to start next month. A conversation I hope to have someday. A version of myself I might grow into. Not goals. Not deadlines. Not expectations. Possibilities. And possibilities are breathable. Possibilities are gentle. Possibilities are invitations, not demands. Eventually, I learned that the future isn't something you must be ready for. It's something you grow into, one manageable step at a time. As I look back on everything, the darkness, the numbness, the rebirth, I realized something profound. I didn't become stronger. I became softer. And softness is a strength I never knew I needed. This journey taught me that survival is not dramatic. It's quiet. It's insisting on breathing even when breath feels optional. That healing is not linear. It spirals, loops, dips, and rises. That progress is not loud. It murmurs. That rest is not earned. It is required. That connection is not optional. It is oxygen. That vulnerability is not weakness. It is honesty. That meaning is not found. It is built slowly, patiently, gently. And most importantly, that the story doesn't end where despair once convinced me it would. If you are listening to this, if you have followed my voice through the shadows and into the quiet, I want you to know something. Your story is still unfolding, no matter how stagnant you feel, no matter how hollow, no matter how tired. This moment is not the end. There are versions of you haven't met yet. There are days waiting for you that will feel lighter than this one. There are small joys approaching you, even now, that you can't yet see. Stay long enough to encounter them. Stay long enough to witness your own transformation. Stay long enough to feel the weight lift, gradually, tenderly. Stay long enough to return to yourself. Not the old you, the new you, the becoming you. And above all, stay